right, we're on.
Call to order. Pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, moving on to the approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting, May 12th, 2025.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the May 12th meeting.
Second. All right, properly moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to the approval of the general fund vouchers, 82,345, voiding 82,396 through 82,445, wire transfers 2025-0401 through 2025-0454.
I make a motion to approve the general fund vouchers and wire transfers as read.
I'll second.
All right, properly moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Moving on for procedures of public comment. Is there anyone? No public comments. Okay, that brings us to Spotlight on Education.
Okay.
Mrs.
Pickard?
Super informal. We had that opportunity through Teresa. She had some connections with St. Croix County, and we were able to host the families and schools together. It's called FAST program. FAST program is a national program, not national, it is a worldwide program where we help families kind of almost train them on how to interact with their children, their young children. So this year we were encouraged to have 10 families, which 6 needed to complete it in order to count, I guess. We actually had 6 families complete it. We did have over 12 kids, but over 10 kids, but we had 10 families start off with us, and some just had some schedule changes and things like that, so they weren't able to finish. But we had an absolute blast. They were all boys except for one. So it was very busy in there. Ashley from St. Croix County kind of led the program. Teresa and I just kind of helped out, played with the kids while the parents were meeting, and I think there was a lot of really good connections with some families that were newer to the district, or even families that have been here for quite a long time. We had Sam Kelly come back with her little guy, and she was kind of the parent coordinator, the parent leader, which was really neat to have her come back and be part of it too. It was really great. We had a lot of dads in there, and so that was really neat to see them become involved too. But overall, it went really great. We had playtime. We did a craft time with the kid, or the parents did craft time. We had a playtime while they met, and then we kind of finished up with supper at the end, where each one of us took a table and got to make some really good connections with the parents. So hopefully when they come into 4K in a couple of years, it's a pretty easy transition for the kiddos and for the families. So anything you want to add?
I'll just add to that. That's done a really nice job. So it's a partnership with the Family Resource Center of St. Croix Valley out of Baldwin. And it's geared towards the youngers. I think it's 5 and under, 4 and under.
Yeah.
So anyone could sign up. Jess did a really nice job of having the things ready for early childhood screening days. So that's when most of the parents heard about it. We opened it only to Clear Lake families first, just to give that support. We've been wanting to do some more, kiddos who aren't old enough to come to school, start building those connections and really giving that support. And I feel it was a resounding success. We want to give a huge thanks to our food service, because Family Resource Center provides, the funding. We didn't have any money from our district to go into this, so they have funding. But Tara, Petter, and Amanda, they provided and were there each night to serve supper, which was really awesome.
And the kids ate really good, so they know it was good food.
Yeah.
Good,
So
good food.
it kind of shows off our food service, and normally when they're hosting these, they're at libraries or community centers or things, and they were really, really excited that it was a school, which is families and schools together, but they aren't always housed in schools. So they're kind of looking at our program as like a way to encourage some other schools to really start partnering with them. And often with the food, they're getting it catered from a grocery store or a restaurant or something. So they were that was just huge to have our food service involved. Just did a brunt of the work with it, prepping the activities and things. So it was fantastic. We're hoping to run another session next spring. It'll probably just be a site just once a year. But the families had great feedback, and it really was neat to see and kind of model how to interact with young kids and do those learning activities that don't take a lot. And I think that's what opened up their eyes, like, oh, it doesn't take much. And it's all sorts of families. It wasn't families we were targeting. It was just who's interested. So, but very, very,
A lot of growth with the kids and the families in that 8 weeks.
yeah.
Well, 7 weeks, because we had to cancel the one, but.
Yes.
Yes. So,
Yeah. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, kudos to you two for taking on the extra work, to do it, and is, between the families, this district, and the community resource, just great connections with all of them together. So just a great way to do that community outreach. So thank you both for your work.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the.
Thanks, Mrs. Pickard.
Thank you.
thank you so much.
I thought she was going to stay.
I have supper after. Yeah.
Moving on to the approval of resignations and retirements.
Okay, so we just have a couple of resignations. Mrs. Rubel, junior high track coach, she is resigning from her junior high track coaching, and that it's been a number of years. I'm trying to think how long. It's been quite a while, probably maybe since I've been here. That's quite a while that she's been coaching junior high track, but she's just stepping away from that. Been doing it a lot of years. So, and then we have Desiree Wishard. She's one of our elementary school paraprofessionals, and she's personal reasons going to be moving, and so she's not coming back next year, 25-26. And then also Dave Corbett, who works in our kitchen staff at the elementary school as a dishwasher a few hours a day, and he's also not planning to come back next year. So through those 3 resignations.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the resignations listed.
I'll second.
All right. It's properly moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, we will move on to approval of hires.
Okay, so we've had a ton of teaching hires the last few months, but none tonight. But we do have some co-curricular hires, some coaching hires that have been made in the last month since the last meeting. So we had the head football coaching position open, and a few weeks ago, 3 weeks ago or more, probably had those interviews, and so offered and accepted by Neil Larson to be our head football coach for this coming fall. And then also we had a couple middle school volleyball coaching positions open, and so we would like to recommend Lori Frenchu and Lily Peets for those 2 positions.
Do I have a motion?
I was going to ask a question. Do we know assistants for football?
Still working on that. There's two assistant openings, and still
Internal,
not
external,
filled yet.
probably?
We'll see what we get. So, but yeah. And Coach Larson now being in place, he can try to also be part of that process too.
Nice.
I move to approve the new hires.
Second.
All right, properly moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? All right, seeing none, we will move on to the approval of supplemental student accident insurance renewal.
Okay, so this is our annual renewal, student assurance in the company. And in the years that I've been here, the rate per pupil has never gone up. So we pay a base rate for our athletic coverage for senior high, junior high based on enrollment. And I mean, we're at a minimum enrollment, so that's a base rate, and then it's also the all pupil coverage for the school year is $6 per student. So the premium actually is down a little bit from last year just because we have fewer students. So this is just a supplemental insurance. This is for students or student athletes who get injured while competing or while at school. Maybe they're at recess or gym class. Maybe they're walking down the hall and something have an accident. But this is that supplemental insurance for their injuries. So,
Okay.
Any questions about that?
Seeing none, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the supplemental student accident insurance renewal.
Second.
All right, properly moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, we will move on to the approval of the 25-26 speech language therapy contract.
Okay, so we do have a speech language therapist in person in district starting this past year. Danielle Clark joined us for this past school year, so it was great to have an in-person person again, but she's part-time, and so we did contract last year and we intend to again next year for a handful of students. We're talking like a half a dozen or so that don't fit in her load or some special situations. So if you scroll all the way to page 4, it's just so we're contracting for a minimum of 6 students. It may grow a little bit beyond that. We'll probably add a few as we get referrals and so on, but so just over $1,700 for 6 students, and then the rate you can see if we have additional students added. So again, this is just to kind of supplement what Mrs. Clark does for us. So, and we've had a good relationship with Launch Therapies. They've been really good to work with for a number of years.
Any questions? Not? Do I have a motion?
I move to approve the 25-26 speech language therapy contract.
Second.
All right, it's been properly moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, we will move on to the consideration and approval of contract for athletic trainer services for 25-26.
Okay, so you might recall last year we were having a discussion about undergoing this for the first year. So we contracted with Mel Lewis last year to be our trainer. All reports were that it went extremely well. There's a shortage of athletic trainers, and so it's very difficult to find athletic trainers. And so, very fortunate to have Mel working with our students, I think, and committed to our district. And so this past year, I think, went very well. When we made the choice to do this last year, we looked at the budget and kind of made estimates and tried to estimate it conservatively. And we tracked the expenses this year, and it came in better than budgeted. And so I think it was reasonable that way. And that's taking into account Mel did take some leave at the end of the year. She had a baby. Congratulations to her. So I would highly recommend that we renew that. It was a very, very good experience, I think. A real asset. Any questions?
I think the only question is, don't we survey our students, like student athletes? Do we ask anything about athletic training and get any feedback
We
from them?
haven't.
Okay.
I don't think so.
But we certainly could do.
Yeah.
Yeah, just wondering.
Mm-hmm.
Haven't heard anything.
Mm-hmm.
She's still going to coach too, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, we have a tournament on Friday.
Yep. So
Just making sure.
All right, if we are okay with this, do I see a motion? Can I get a motion?
Move to approve the renewal of Mel's
Athletic trainer
athletic
services.
trainer. I lost my page. So. Athletic trainer position, yeah.
I'll second.
All right, and that's been properly moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, seeing none, motion passes. We move on to consideration and approval of updated contract for website hosting and communication platform. I think this is the one we want to table to close session.
Yeah, we can, there's some competitive bids here, so we can do that. I can just kind of give, for people listening or whatever, and give an overview of just, so our current website hosting contract is up for renewal here July 1st, so this has been something we've been looking at for a few months. And, since we last did this, we currently, we think about all of our communication tools. We've got our website, certainly. We use our mass calling system, School Messenger, currently to call for emergencies or snow days or parent notifications. We've also had discussions at the board level about parent communication apps, like for the teacher to communicate with their classroom parents, or for a sports team or a club to be able to communicate with the parents. And how we've got a variety of different, some teams use Remind, and some use Team Reach, and some use Sports U, and some, elementary was using Seesaw for classroom communication, but that price has kind of skyrocketed the last couple of years. So we're just looking at all of our different options, and so we're looking at, there's a few options out there that kind of coalesce all that into one service. And so that was kind of the mindset we were going into with it. So like I said, I think it would probably be best to review the competitive bids in closed, but that's what the issue is that we're looking at here.
Okay, we'll move that into closed session. That moves us to the review of the WIAA constitutional and policy updates.
Okay, so Mr. Rosine, our athletic director is here to join us and share. And Dale, did you need me to put the PowerPoint up there?
No, I
Okay.
don't know if you wanted to, but
There was a presentation that was attached if you guys wanted to look at it, but Dale was just going to give a...
yeah, just to basically come and answer any questions you have. So I had a coaches meeting, or all head coaches meeting at the end of the school year, just to kind of review ETS, making sure we have a lot of new coaches, making sure that some of them, we invited Brian, ETS coordinator, the representative, and he spoke very well actually to our coaches, just to try and give an overview of the ETS program. So then followed that by a couple of the WIA changes. And I don't know if you've been following, but some of the Constitution and bylaws have changed. And a couple of the big ones was, or the biggest one in my mind was unlimited contact by coaches in the summer. For the record, I voted no, but it overwhelmingly passed. My hesitation and fear was just making sure that kids had a summer and not putting too much strain on kids during the summer. Previously, they had 5 days in the summer. Now it's unlimited. In the discussion at the WIA annual meeting, the reason or the theory behind kind of opening it up to unlimited is not to necessarily start scheduling more things, but just to take some of the gray area out of that. So the spirit of the new language is trying to allow coaches to that come in and do the open gyms, pull a kid aside, work on some form. You're in the weight room. After the weight room, you can go and work on some detailed things that will help kids while they're there. Not necessarily try and schedule and jam pack a schedule in, but just to try and remove some of the gray areas so coaches can work with the student athletes and give them some support in the summer without kind of crossing the line on those 5 contact days. So that was the spirit of the change. So when I met with the coaches, that was my message to them was, I get it that it's unlimited, but I also want the kids to have summer. The summer is as short as it is. I don't want them to start piling on a lot more dates and then conflicting with other sports, leading to one sport athletes is my fear. So we'll take a look how this summer goes, and then if need be, trying to really come up with maybe a district policy if coaches are kind of abusing that unlimited sport or contact. Any question on the unlimited part? And then the other, yeah.
Has that kept us from doing camps and stuff like that? Can we?
No, it's not kept us from it. Not necessarily. The camps typically are going to be elementary, junior high, and that usually is not necessarily. That wasn't in the 5-day contact. Now the high school camps, usually a lot of the coaches will bring in somebody. I know, like Maggie, my daughter, she goes around to a couple different high schools and does. They hire her to go in and do volleyball camps for their programs in the summer, which is probably more advantageous than the coach running a camp for the kids because they're, obviously hearing a different message from somebody else. So, so that really hasn't stopped us from having camps.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, and like Sarge this year, he's been good about setting out other camps like River Falls, Rice Lake. I mean, that's typically where I would send my kids anyway, so.
I was just going to add to the student concern with them losing their summer, but also a concern with coaches that they're going to feel this pressure to, if somebody else is going 6 days a week in the summer, that they have to keep up with the Joneses, and we just don't want our coaches to. It's tough enough to find coaches that we don't want them to feel that pressure because of this bylaw change too.
Right.
Yeah, I actually spoke with.
Is that more D1 level school where they specialize in one sport and that coach wants to be able to work around the year with them?
Whatever winning program does, schools, surrounding schools will try and copy it. And if they're hammering the student contact and having these, and by no doubt will make you better, but it's not necessarily what's best for the kids.
It's interesting because it all kind of started with a couple of years ago. The WI put together this ad hoc committee for studying, season length and coach contact and all that. And with the question was like, okay, how do we get some consistency and kind of get it under control? And what's interesting is what they came out with was kind of surprising to change that summer contact rule and actually expanded it. But like Dale said, the spirit of it is maybe to take away some of the gray area that was there. So yeah, we shall see. The tough thing, like Dale said, is it happened this spring. So we haven't really, a lot of schools are like us kind of scrambling to meet with their coaches to figure out, there's not necessarily a lot of set expectations. But I feel like, Dale did a good job meeting with the coaches and kind of, I don't anticipate them, stepping on each other's toes or intentionally, but we shall see. It's difficult for them to do, and I think with not much time to plan, we have to be wary of that.
Yeah, I do see a bonus to it though. I mean, you get kids that are missing structure in the summer and really want that contact too, because they just don't have the school, and
Yeah, I just don't want it to start interfering with, and making kids feel guilty about not being there on all of these scheduled days, not being able to take family trips, and not being able to spend 2 weeks at grandma and grandpa's, or go to the aunt uncle's farm for a week or two. There's just so much so much more out there that I want to make sure our kids are well rounded, not just good athletes.
And Brian's point too about coach burnout, we want to be wary of that.
And it is clear there that coaches can't be mandatory.
Yeah.
But that's still.
But that's a hard one.
There's a level of pressure on the kid that, it's scheduled, I gotta be there, so.
And that's what I told the coaches. I'm like, you can say it's not required, but we all know that it's that internal expectation that they feel like if they don't, then they're going to be penalized for it, which is unfortunate. So the last one was the NIL, which again, I voted for it just because, not that I'm in favor of NIL, and we all know that the effect that the NIL has had on college. This is a totally different bill or a totally different language, and basically it was going to pass. Some languages was going to be out there for kids to be able to make money on their name, image, and likeness, but it's the bill that we adopted, or the language that we adopted, was pretty strict, and I could live with it. No kid can. You have to remove anything with Clear Lake, anything with a WIA, or any conference affiliation. So if they're photoed, making money, they can't be wearing a Clear Lake jersey. And the big one is a couple of the big points is they can't get paid for performance. They can't get paid just because they come out for a team. Or they average a double. There's no incentive on performance. It's strictly and then the other major one, which was my fear with private schools, kind of using it to recruit. So no person or business that gives money to the school can give money to an athlete. So if you have ties to the school financially, you cannot support an NIL. So basically, it kind of comes down to corporate, outside of this area. So there's a lot of, some minor ones. I don't foresee us it really affecting our kids, but I just wanted to make you aware that you might see some sport drinks, that, they're trying to get into kids' hands, and, they might, give a free few cases if they post something on, their social media. But I don't really see it being too big of a deal in Clear Lake anyway, until we have that D1 athlete that's gonna, make some money and donate back to the school. So
The question I hear people, comes up, and people say, why? Why are we doing this? Why is WIA doing this? And I think it's important to know, like Dale's saying, it doesn't apply to 99.9% of athletes, but you do have, these high school athletes who are big time recruits, and they're sort of like mini celebrities in their town or community or city or whatever. So what's going on in other states, neighboring states, is you have these families or these athletes saying, you're denying me my constitutional right to make money off my name by doing this, and the lawsuits are going in favor of the student athlete instead of the association, the state associations. And then you've also got sympathetic legislators who are, in states crafting legislation saying we can't deny these kids their opportunity, which, I don't agree with that thinking, but so, the WIAA, their messaging was about, either we can craft the rules ourselves and make it something that we feel is fairly restrictive and fairly workable, or it's going to happen to us, from the outside. And so when you guys get questions about why the heck are we doing this, and same with the summer contact too, it's all voted on by the membership. So, sometimes it's easy to point the WIA as kind of like the big brother or whatever, and that they're doing these things. Well, it is membership driven, so the members all voted on it. So for various reasons, like Dale said. So just so you all as members, when you have people come to you, ask you those questions, just so you're informed.
I sat through that down at the school board convention.
That's right.
And it seems like the WIA is being proactive instead of sitting back, letting some get forced on them, where they did have some say to put into it now. So.
Yeah.
And that's why the NCAA is such a mess, is because it got forced on them.
Right. So
With a lawsuit,
yeah, this is kind of a good thing for having some say. So.
And are we going to promote it to kids or parents?
No, I don't foresee us promoting it. That just kind of creates, I guess I wrangle with that, but I don't see us promoting it other than informing them of what the rules are. And the school cannot take any steps to helping the kid with the NIL, and they can't have an agent, so this has got to be, student driven. The one thing that it does kind of handcuff them with is they can't be their own boss as far as when in dealing with that sport. So let's say that student wants to put on a camp, they can't. And I'm like, and I was kind of baffled by that at first, except until Chris and I were talking. Chris is like, well, think about it though. If you have some donor that way to get around, it's a get around of. All right, you put a camp on at this school, we'll pay you, I'll send my kid, we'll call it a camp, and we'll pay you some money. And I can see that happening. So that is one thing that they can't do, but they can go work for a company, non-affiliated, and there's companies out there looking for, camp hosts or camp coaches, so they can still do it, they just can't be self-employed.
So like ETS couldn't hire one of our employees to be a spokesperson?
To be a spokesperson? Correct.
Right, because
Right.
they already have a contract with us. Right.
They work with us, yeah.
But they're not a donor, so that'd be a good question to bring to somebody if that ever came up, but yeah.
Okay.
Any other? All right. I'm gonna go pack for Canada, so.
All right, have fun.
Thanks, Dale.
All right, well, that'll move us to
Yeah.
consideration and approval of a donation to Kinship of Polk County.
Okay, so you might recall the last couple of years, Kinship of Polk County has received a donation from the district, $1,000, and up a few years ago it was up to $2,000. And they did send a very nice letter at the end of the school year requesting that again, that kind of support. I attached the letter and I attached some of the statistics of the impact that Kinship has, specifically in Clear Lake. I don't know if principals, if you have anything to weigh in on the Kinship program. Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot out of the blue here, but it's great.
Yeah, seeing it from the elementary, I mean, they just wait and their faces just absolutely light up once they see their buddy show up. So I know from personal experience, my own kiddos, my son especially, I mean, we've made some connections outside of the school as well, just for a certain circumstance. And it honestly is one of the best programs that is out there. Amy Danielson, who is our contact, she even sent, I don't know if other senior parents got this, but a little kinship card that had pictures of the senior with their kinship buddy and a sweet note inside. So it just boosts kind of the high school students' confidence and appreciation. So
From a high school perspective, it's for our kids, it's fantastic. They may get more out of it than the littles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the training that they do with the mentors is really, and the screening that they do, it's just fantastic.
How many kids are like involved from high school down?
Sorry, I've got that list, but I don't know what I
I
know that
want to
number.
say 25 to 30.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if I've got it.
And often
It's in the annual.
a waiting list.
I was just gonna say, it's one of the biggest.
That's what my
like,
question is, can we do
clubs.
more of it?
We certainly can.
30
It's
last
just
year.
making sure that we have enough high school students that have the time they can commit.
And they focus on kids in the elementary that probably need.
Mhm.
They go over once a week to meet with them.
Yeah, the kids are nominated either by parents or by teachers or staff, and yep. So there were 30 matches last year. I'm just reading in the materials here. So,
And some high school kids that are not always the most responsible, and if there's a conflict with their day to go to kinship, they take care of it to make sure they can go another day that week, because they don't want to miss it. So it's pretty cool.
So yeah, so they're requesting a donation of $2,000, which is what we did last year.
All right.
I move to approve the donation to Kinship of Polk County.
I'll second.
All right. Properly moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Moving on to overview of school perception student and staff survey responses.
Okay, so this was the second year doing student and staff surveys with school perceptions. They did them in early April. We got the results a while back, and so Rob Demise of School Perceptions, if you recall, he is the one who zoomed in at the retreat last summer and met with us, and he was not available tonight. He's actually meeting with another school board from another district, but he said, hey, you know what, I can record a presentation for you and share that, and then obviously any questions we have during or after, we can write them down. I'll email him to, and he said, I'll be absolutely happy to reply to any questions that there are. So if you'll give me a second, so I can get the video set up here. I knew we had too much time that the TV wasn't going to stay on the whole time anyway, so I shut it off. And then there are attachments, and I don't know if anyone wants, I just made paper copies of the executive summary, so if anyone wants copies of that, you can. Here's the student one, here's the staff one if you want, and then there's also the full summary in there, but I didn't make copies of that. That's a lot of pages, but there's enough for those for everybody in those. They look the same, but they're different. I mean, the one that Corey has looks the same as yours. You just gotta look at the label
Yep,
on
so
top.
those are,
The
they're
graphics
all
are
the same. So just grab two from Chrissy Pearl.
I'll trade you.
Really? You gonna trade me?
Thank you.
That one.
Did check the volume before and everything, so I think it should be good. Make sure. So can everybody, should I move it, or is everybody okay to see it there? That'd be great from where we're at. So.
I watched it.
Hello, I'm Rob Beese, Vice President of Research at School Perceptions, and I will be taking you through your staff and student summary report for your 2 surveys that wrapped up this spring. There's going to be a few different colors on our presentation today. We'll begin with some blue slides. Those are related to just background, not a whole lot of information on there. Our yellow slides will talk about the respondent info, how many people took your survey, when it was sent out, or the details related to the surveys and getting them out themselves. We'll spend most of our time with the results and analysis, and then even though I'm not able to be with you in person this evening, I do know that Chris is prepared to pass along any questions that you have, and I will make sure I keep an eye on my inbox and get you answers to those questions that come up. So just a reminder of who we are. We've now worked with Clear Lake a couple of times over the past couple of years. School Perceptions is an independent educational research firm. We help you as educational leaders gather, organize, and use data to make strategic decisions. This isn't our first rodeo, so we've been doing this since 2002. We've conducted over 3 million staff, parent, student, and community surveys, all in the name of school improvement. And those surveys have been spread out north of 1,000 school districts nationwide, who have all been in some way navigating the strategic planning and or referendum planning process. We'll begin with your staff. The deadline was April 16th of this year. We had 72 respondents for a 66% participation rate. So 2/3 on the dot of staff who received the survey took it, which is about as average gets in the staff survey world. Average would be anywhere between 60 and 75%. You're right in the middle of that, so you're very normal here. And you have plenty of respondents to help aggregate this data across your entire staff. Where we begin, with staff specifically, are your indexes. Indexes are designed to provide you, again, as educational leaders in the Clear Lake community, with a snapshot of the results. So we're going to begin from a more general perspective, and then as we go through this report, we're going to dig into some of the questions that feed these indexes. And that's exactly what an index does. They're going to take key questions throughout the survey and build an index from them, so that you kind of have a 30,000-foot view starting point of where your data is heading. Now, bear in mind here that the scale is 1 to 5. The perfect score is 5.00, where everybody would strongly agree. The bottom score is 1.00, where everybody strongly disagrees. Now, the middle of that scale is 3.00. I'll come back to that point in just a moment. But in an ideal world, every score, every item would be 5.0 across the board. So looking at those staff indexes, just like last year, there are 5 of them. Academics, we are effective in teaching and supporting our students. Engagement, defined as I like working at this school because I am valued, heard, and can contribute. The third is support. I have the support I need to help educate our students and work as a team. Fourth is the student experience from the perspective of staff. Are students accepted, respected, and supported at school? And then staff perspective of their own staff experience. Are staff accepted, respected, and supported at school? A few notes as we begin. So looking at your current score column first. Note that none of your scores are below the middle point. You are well north of 3.00 on all of these, which is an excellent place to be. So none of these items are leaning towards disagreement, they're all leaning towards agreement. And in the case of support, starting to get into that agree to strongly agree range with you receiving a score north of 4.00. The other great news here is that across the board, you are up. Large growth in staff satisfaction with academic rigor and their effectiveness in teaching and supporting our students. Up nearly 7% from a score of 3.30 to 3.52 in that particular item, followed in second place by the student experience, up nearly 3% from that item. The last column will show the comparison percentile. That is the percentage of districts that you are outperforming among a comparison pool of districts that are similar to Clear Lake. Or in other words, that academic index that I just mentioned. In this case, you are outperforming 43% of other districts in your comparison pool. in-year comparisons are a little bit mixed here. You have some that are above the median, some that are below the median. In fact, you are outperforming 70% of other districts in terms of that support index. I have the support I need to help educate our students and work as a team. 3 of your indexes are above the median: engagement, support, and the staff experience. Now, obviously, in an ideal world, you'd love to be outperforming every other school district in your comparison pool. But that said, one reason why I'm very encouraged by this data here is that none of it has regressed. You have made really solid progress in every single one of these. And that's kind of all you can ask for. You are moving the needle in the right direction with all of your percent changes being to the positive. However, let's look at some of those items that feed those indexes. Now, same scale here, so keep that in mind. The worst possible score is 1, best possible score is 5, which means the middle remains 3, which is again how I like to eyeball this data. What scores are above 3, what scores are below 3, because anything below 3 means that staff are in aggregate disagreeing with that item. So let's dig in. Where is Clear Lake performing the best from the perspective of their staff? The number 1 overall item, at a score of 4.38, I have healthy working relationships with my coworkers. Number 2, I feel safe at work. 3 and 4 are both related to technology. Access to and technology, access to the technology support, and then access to the technology itself to do the job well. And regularly supporting or recognizing colleagues rounds out at a score of 4.14. So not only are these your highest scores, but from a general perspective, they are high, period. Anytime I can type a 4 is a pretty good day, and some of these, especially with these first 2 rows here, you're well north of 4. You're really getting into that strong degree range with some of these. The other reason I feel very encouraged by this data is some of these things that you have to have in place if you want to make progress in other areas are here. In other words, if staff don't feel like they get along with each other, have healthy working relationships, if they don't feel supported by each other, and those staff don't feel safe at work, those are kind of baseline foundational aspects that you have to have in place if you want to make progress on anything else in this survey. And the good news is that you've cleared that hurdle. You have some of those pieces that have to be in place, and I'm very encouraged by this because some items are maybe a little bit more equal than others. It's really, really good news that some of the items that you have at the top are the ones that are at the top. But when we make a list, it's just that. It's a list, something's got to be at the top, something's got to be at the bottom. The 2 items that are at the bottom are related to discipline. The effectiveness of the practices and policies, and the extent to which those practices and policies are consistent from classroom to classroom, building to building, and so on. In fact, those are the only 2 that staff in ed lean towards disagreement. So if there's one thing I'm taking out of this survey here, it's that staff are asking for help for leaders from the district in continuing to improve discipline practices and consistency. Your third row is very much related to those 2 discipline items. So when students feel more socially and emotionally supported, discipline problems tend to decrease along with it. But I will note, though, that at a score of 3.20, you're back on the side of agree in aggregate from your staff. So only 2 items again are below 3.00. I want to respect those, but I also want to note that it's great that there aren't 4 items there because typically they're up. It's uncommon to see only 2 items be below 3.00. But that said, your 2 items that are at the bottom are very, very, very common to be at the bottom. I can't tell you the last time I made a report and didn't have discipline at the bottom. Doesn't matter whether you're a K-8 school, 9-12, large, small, urban, rural, Arizona, Colorado, doesn't matter where you are. Those 2 items have been at the bottom for as long as I can remember coming out of COVID. Other than that, even some of your lowest scores are relatively speaking quite high. 3.55 and 3.58, you're well into that agreement range, even though from a broad perspective they are towards the lower end of your scores. So what this is telling me is most of your scores are high, but there's a few things related to student support and discipline that need support. Very much relatedly though, 5 items with the most growth. Here, I think you really need to celebrate that items that were at the bottom last year are towards the bottom this year, but you're making substantial strides in helping solve those problems. Now, when I make a slide like this with growth, if a district makes growth, which by the way obviously is not guaranteed, if a district makes growth, it's normally in about 2, 3, 4% for any given item. You have blown that out of the water. I very, very rarely, maybe once every couple of years, will take percentages that hit the 20-some increased growth. Even double digits is pretty rare. So I want to note that yes, your staff scores, where your staff is telling you that you need help is related to discipline, but you've really made good strides here. 22% growth in terms of the effectiveness, 22% growth in terms of consistency, 15% growth in the social emotional needs, 12% growth ensuring that every student has a connection with at least one adult in school, and double-digit growth again for district's pay practices are fair. What about items that declined? None of which are substantial here, but I do want to respect what staff told us. Very slight decline in most days I look forward to going to work, similar magnitude for feeling comfortable sharing input to concerns with the supervisor and administrator, having access to the technology support I need. Bear in mind that that is a very, very high scoring item. So I would say that your A that you got, just is a slightly lower A. It was just going to be hard to maintain the really high flying scores that you got with technology, so that really doesn't concern me a whole lot. About 3% decline in staff input being valued, and about a 3% decline in I have the materials and supplies I need to do my job well. So again, I want to respect these. I want to respect what staff are telling you where they need help, but I am also encouraged that the size of your growths vastly outweigh the size of your declines here. What about some items with the highest comparisons? So once again, just in terms of a comparison percentile, what that's telling you is what percentage of districts among our comparisons are we outperforming. So the perfect would be 99th percentile, because that would mean that you are outperforming every single other district in your comparison pool. The worst is the first percentile, because that would mean that everybody else is outperforming you. So here, the amount of work I am asked to do is reasonable or manageable. You are doing better than 96% of other districts on that question. You're outperforming 92% of other districts in terms of staff support. I feel supported or recognized by my colleagues when I do a good job. Outperforming 9 in 10 districts in terms of the pay practices being fair. And 2 other very high scores here. You're outperforming 82% of other districts on 2 items. In the last year, I received useful feedback to help improve my work, and I have opportunities for training or PD to help improve my work. Flip that coin over though. Where are other districts outperforming Clear Lake? You're at the 38th percentile in terms of our staff handle student discipline in a consistent manner. In other words, flipping that around, 62% of our other districts outperform Clear Lake. 35th percentile, with staff feeling comfortable sharing input or concerns with their supervisor or administrator. 26th percentile, our staff does a good job of educating our students. 22nd percentile, our school supports students from diverse backgrounds. And finally, the 10th percentile, all students in our school are respected for their values and beliefs. One more section for staff. We are going to begin with a different scale here though. So notice that we're stepping away from an agreement scale on a 1 to 5 scale. And we are looking at a 1 to 4 scale, poor, fair, good, and great. So now, well, the lowest score remains 1. Now your perfect score is 4. We call this survey section recommendations. So the question read in the upper left, how is the district doing in each of the following areas? Staff believe that the district is doing a better job of keeping the public informed. You're up 3.2% and outperforming most other districts. You're at the 59th percentile. Staff see the district as a better source of pride in the community than they did just 1 year ago. You're up 1.3% there at the 39th percentile. Same with delivering a high quality education, 39th percentile, exact same score. And then an ever so slight decline, a decline of 1% in terms of managing funds appropriately, really quite small, 0.03 of a point, and you are outperforming nearly 80% of other districts on that particular metric. So slight decline, but still outperforming a vast number of comparison students. Finally, for staff, on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend the district as a place of employment? Really quite hefty growth here as well. You're up 8%. Last year when I gave you this data, you were at a score of 7.30. Now you're up in the 8 range. You're at 7.88, which means that on the dot, you are outperforming 80% of other districts in your comparison pool. So not only are you up, you're near 8, which I'll talk about more in just a second. You're up 8%, and totally coincidental, another 8 here, you're at the 80th percentile. So all good news in that gray box in the lower right-hand corner. Another way to look at this data is by summing up the 8s, 9s, and 10s. So when I take 8, 9, and 10, doing that math off the top of my head, 29 and 25 is 54, adding in another 18, you're at 72%. So nearly 3/4 of your staff are at an 8, 9, or 10. Now, the reason that's good is because the research behind this question suggests that those folks that give themselves an 8, a 9, or a 10 will act as ambassadors on your behalf. They will go out and talk well about the district, and they are the ones to initiate that conversation. They will strike up a conversation with somebody behind them in a concession stand, at a concert, at a family event, and they will talk about the good things that Clear Lake is doing. And again, you have nearly 3/4 of your staff that are the conversation sparkers. When you add in the 6 and the 7s with another 13%, you're looking at about 85% of your staff that have a positive association with what you're doing, which is an excellent place to be. Turning the page to students. Here, you had a whopping nearly 90% of students participate. So whatever you did administratively to get this survey out really seemed like it worked. So whether you allocated time maybe after a standardized test or allocated time in the room or advisory period, whatever you did to allocate time for students to take this survey really worked well. You had nearly 9 and 10 students who received the survey taken. Here, we have some helpful emojis for the students, especially those that are nonverbal. But we're going to begin with our index analysis, that 30,000-foot view on a scale of 1 to 5. 5 being the best, 1 being the worst. So looking at those indexes, very similar to your staff. You are up across the board. You're up 3.7% in the connection index. I belong at school because I have healthy relationships with other students and adults and am actively involved in school-related activities. Up 4.5% in learning. I learn at school because my classes are challenging, interesting, and I can get help when I need it. Up over 5% in environment. I like being at school because it's a place that's safe, warm, and fun. And up nearly 7%. I am accepted, respected, and have the support I need to be successful at school. Rounds out your indexes with experience. So once again, really making growth here. And most of your comparison percentiles are more or less kind of near the middle of the 50th percentile. In this case, again, not to minimize the good or bad nature of a comparison percentile, but in this case, my heavy emphasis is Clear Lake is going in the right direction, and that's all you can ask. You have definitely seen positive scores across the board for your kiddos in terms of these indexes. Same kind of idea though. Let's look at some of those items that feed those indexes. Beginning with the 5 items with the highest scores, students really feel strong connections to other students. They have friends to sit with at lunch or hang out with at school, which is hugely important for student-to-student engagement and feeling welcome at school. Similarly, not only are students feeling supported by other students, they're also feeling supported by at least one adult at school they can talk to. You're at a score of 4.47 there, and 2 other scores that are very, very high, hovering around that 4.4 range. Students are trying their best at school. They have friends who help them, or have friends who help them when they need help, and their parents and guardians are also a source of help. So what this is telling me here is that interpersonal connections in Clear Lake are really very strong. And same point I made here with staff, it's very difficult for students to make progress if they're not feeling supported by other students, by their parents, by families at home, by other adults at school. So not only are kids trying their best, but they feel supported, which is really, really positive, and all of these scores are really quite high. So again, I'm really pleased with this. I'm really, really pleased with these scores you have for your kiddos. Much like your staff, 2, but only 2 items fall below 3, and not by much. The homework and projects I'm assigned help me learn and are more than just busy work, just a hair below the median at 2.99. And most kids at school follow the rules at 2.95. Now what's interesting about that is you can see here the data starting to corroborate one another. For staff, the biggest issue was discipline. They need help there. And the kids aren't blind to that. The kids are also saying that in terms of most kids at school following the rules, it's the lowest score. So now you're hearing from both your students and your staff, if there's one place where we should begin our homework as educational leaders, be it the board and administrators, is really improving some of those discipline, or maybe for Clear Lake more specifically, keeping the train on the tracks because you did see such massive growth for your staff year over year. Otherwise, the 3 other items are at least above 3 and some well above 3. So students leaning towards overall agreement in terms of, I talk to people outside of school about what I'm learning. If they are bullied, they feel comfortable talking to someone about it, and they can relate to what they're learning at school as well. What about items with the most growth? So just going back one slide, if you recall, one of the items that was just a hair below 3 was the homework and projects on the sign help me learn and are more than just busy work. But that was the item with the most growth, well north of 10% here. Bear in mind, by the way, this is only a question that the high schoolers saw, but for your high schoolers, they're really seeing a lot more meaning in the work that they are doing at school or at home than they were just a year prior. Relatedly, teachers are making their classes more fun and more interesting. More kids have the perspective that more kids are following school rules. They feel more included in class by teachers calling on them, and they feel more connected to their work because teachers are explaining things in a way that they get. So a lot of academics that you're seeing around here as well. So I'm not surprised that staff really saw a large increase in the academic index because of this data that we're seeing here with students. Students feel like they're more included in class, they have a better understanding of what teachers are saying, their classes are more engaging, and the work that they're doing is more engaging. And oh, by the way, when discipline is also improved, it's easier for all those things to happen. Maybe the biggest piece of good news. I don't have any data for you here in a really good way. Every survey question at the district level demonstrated year-over-year growth. There are 0 items for students that were worse this year than they were last year. In my career in school perceptions, I've maybe made this slide twice, 3 times ever. This is very, very rare. In other words, not to sound like a broken record, but every student item this year for the district is higher than it was last year. Every single one, really strong strides there, really not normal in an amazing way. What about you compared to other districts? You darn near set the curve. You're outperforming 98% of other districts in terms of if I need help, I have at least one adult at school I can talk to. Outperforming about 2/3 of other districts with tech and being called on in class. I can go online or use a device at school when I need it, and my teachers call on me in class. And then 2 that are also above the median. My teachers make their classes fun and interesting, and I feel safe at school. Where are other districts outperforming Clear Lake? I have friends who help me when I need help. I talk to people outside of school about what I'm learning. And if I were bullied, I would feel comfortable talking to someone about it. You're outperforming about 1/4 of other districts on those 3 questions. You're at the 18th percentile for I like to learn new things, and the 16th percentile for teachers treat me with respect. Digging into that homework and project question, the homework and projects on the sign help me learn are more than just busy work. Once again, these were your high schoolers that saw it. Just wanted to dig into this because this is the one that saw the most growth year-over-year for your students. Up 12.8% from 2.65 to 2.99, so one of the lower scoring items, but again, the one that you saw the most growth on. And you're really seeing that the kids that said no or not really declined quite a bit year-over-year on this particular question. Most days I like my school. Your previous score was 4.21. You went up to 5.71 here for a change of nearly 10%. Now, would we love to see the comparison percentile higher? Absolutely. But once again, I want to really focus on what's most important, which is you compared to you. So I'd love to see you outperforming other districts, but I don't want to minimize the fact that you have nearly 10% growth in terms of this overall satisfaction for students. This does round out my report for you. So like I said, I know Chris is taking any notes of questions that you may have. I apologize for not being able to be with you in person this evening. I was previously booked with a couple of other districts around Wisconsin, but by all means, if you do have any questions, by all means reach out, and I'd be happy to take care of them, and have a good rest of your evening.
Okay. I always appreciate Rob's approach. He's just very quick and to the point. He just moves right along and is very articulate as far as just getting the information conveyed. And I appreciate, most of all, the perspective that he's able to give with working with so many schools and what he does to be able to say, hey, this is a big deal here. This is important here. He just is able to bring the bigger perspective. So. If we have a lot of questions, I can compile questions. We could, the best way, I don't know if, if people, first of all, discussion here at the table. But also, just if there's questions that you maybe jotted down as you were going, or you think of, I could send an email out to just kind of compile and pass those along to him to kind of get a written response from him if we'd like to. So.
I think 89% is phenomenal for the students. It's hard not to listen to this. It is concerning though, with the lowest thing being teachers treat me with respect.
Mm-hmm. Or that I like coming to school most days. Yeah, those are the two that we gotta look at. Those are the ones that gotta dig into
And
getting at the why. Like
I
what's
can relate, and the busy. Even though busy work for homework up, it's pretty low.
Mm-hmm.
But a high score was that they had somebody that they could talk to.
Yeah.
Which is kind of different with those things. I mean,
Right.
Having somebody, which I'm correlating it going, the person you're talking to is probably not a teacher.
Well, the question
It says-
specifically is, I have a staff member that I can
No,
talk
it
to.
just
One of
says
them
I
is.
have one adult at school I can talk to.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily mean it's teacher.
Well,
I would say when
Well,
the
a
students,
staff member, though,
when
or-
the students
Yeah.
look at that question, one adult at school, they think about likely a teacher or another staff member that they're connected with. And when
Yeah.
they think about teachers treat me with respect, they might think about the other end of the spectrum
Right.
on somebody that they maybe don't get along
Yeah.
with. So I think that's probably the difference.
Yeah.
That'd be my guess on
Yeah.
what the difference is
Mhm.
there.
Yeah, I would think the way too that they would maybe interpret the first one would be, in a situation where if I'm in an emergency situation, I have somebody I can talk to. Whereas,
Yeah. Is there a trusted person
Right.
that I know is going to care for me and respond?
Yeah.
I would be curious how, some of this I can relate, those kind of things. Not enjoying new materials, how would how would that relate to maybe getting kids out of the school and doing some of this career path, correlation with some of these classes where, if we're in math, can we get them out into, at least, hop on a bus and go connect it to a career somewhere, or those kind of things. Versus, you're going to need this for college. It makes a big difference, and when you see it and relate it, and
Yeah. What you're saying is, how do we make, how does every teacher think about how to make their class more relevant
right.
to kids? And there's a lot of ways to do that. But yeah, I think that's a good question for us to go back and.
There's more to careers than just being a scientist, an accountant, and an astronaut.
Mhm.
And how do we connect these to careers and make it more relatable? And I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Looking at, go ahead.
It was good to see on the high side that we have parents and guardians to help them with school, because sometimes you wonder about their perception of parent involvement, but it sounds like that's fairly high positive. Sorry, Corey.
No, I was gonna just kind of make something on the staff. It's kind of a little concerning with the most decline there. They don't feel like their input's valued and stuff. I'm just wondering where some of that. They don't feel like they can share input with administration and supervisors.
Mhm. There was a slight decline there,
Mhm.
but it was. Yeah, I had a note about that too somewhere. I think in my scorecard presentation.
Yeah,
The one that
retaining teachers and stuff, I don't like to see it slipping that way. I'd rather see it going
Yeah.
the other way.
Yeah, it declined slightly, but I think, was it still above a 3? I think it was.
one that
Because
stood
that
out
stood out to me too. Like, well, what's that? And
Yeah.
but then it
a
was
little
like,
bit
okay.
more deep dive maybe on what.
Yep.
One that stood out to me too, in that regard, was the staff themselves are saying that the staff does a good job of educating. That was a negative to them,
Right.
was that they're doing a good job of educating. And that's coming from the staff themselves. I think that's.
Yeah, I'd just rather figure out the why there
Right.
before we get over that cliff edge and
Right.
get a handle on it.
Can you give an example of a staff member that would be district-wide? Or do we have any teachers that are district-wide, or is that?
Sure, staff, art teacher, music
Or like-
teachers.
Okay, gotcha, okay.
Yeah,
Was just-
or, like Eve is a district employee,
Yeah.
or a bus driver is a district-wide
Okay.
employee, I guess, so. And
I'm
it's
just
still-
looking at it from a
yeah.
teacher perspective of the
Yeah.
top. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also, they're answering how they answer, so
Yeah,
it's hard to say
however
how they define themselves, So you might have a shared teacher who sees themselves more anchored at the high school or elementary, or they might see themselves as, so it's hard to say.
Yeah.
I know they don't want to break this down so much so you can start to guess who people are answering this. I know
Right.
they're very.
Well, and that's my.
But is there a way for you to see each of your schools?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, each school, you can break it down by employment group.
The group has to be
Teachers
so
versus
big for
paras.
us to see it.
Yeah.
So I can go to this school and look at results, but I don't think I can see results broken down by employee group within the building because that gets too small. Like, I think
Like teachers, you might be able to because it's a
teachers, I
large
think I
group,
can 'cause
but
that's large enough, but
Mhm.
once it gets too small,
Small,
then
then you can't.
we
Yeah.
can't. Yep.
Yeah,
but
and
it
maybe-
is broken down by school level, and by employment groups, teachers, paras.
And I think it's interesting that our teaching staff, or the staff one, is 50% of our people are now 5 years and under. Or that applied to this.
Yeah.
I'm kind of wondering what's gonna happen, as our newer teachers
Get in.
group gets bigger
Mhm.
than our people that have been here 10 years or plus.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What's the perception of be your first or second year?
Mhm.
I just wonder how much that's gonna skew things
Yeah.
for new teachers, especially brand new ones that are
Yeah.
not have taught somewhere else.
I mean, it's like, I see really good growth in the discipline and stuff, but then down in the decline, I don't look forward to going to work. I'm like, where's the disconnect and some of that,
And I, as a person that used to do discipline in a university setting, the hardest thing, and I think you guys would concur, is you can't give out all the facts to everybody.
Right.
So they're gonna see what they see, and that's gonna be a piece of the puzzle.
There's two
People making the
sides.
decisions are seeing all the pieces coming together, and I think that's gonna be a hard thing to always overcome.
Well, as Rob
And I
said,
think it's trust in
Yeah.
who the people are doing the discipline and saying, okay, I know I'm not gonna get all the pieces, but I trust you.
Yeah.
And I think it's a big thing.
Or it's like Rob said, every district, that's always the lowest one. So, like to your point too about and this is coming back to me now. I was looking at this earlier. I feel like whatever the question was about talking to your supervisor or whatever, and there was
Yeah.
definitely differences among employee groups there.
Yeah, I feel comfortable sharing
Mhm.
input.
Yeah,
and
it was
concerns.
there was definitely differences between say different employment groups. I was looking at that.
Well, yeah, because teachers would be different than staff or,
Yeah.
bus drivers.
Is there any way that surveys like this could be put somewhere special in board docs that you could go back to them, 6 months from now? and-
You have all the old meetings. You have access to all the old meetings. in there.
Right.
So if you go back to June, if you go back to
Like, I'm gonna remember which one it's under.
It's, well,
Right, but you
June.
can go back
Yeah.
and do.
June
I go
last
back
year and June this year.
1 year back when I try to
Yeah.
find old
Yeah.
percentages. You
We
can-
did it in June of last year and now June.
Or
here.
maybe we could have like a reference sheet or something that,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and there's what
so
they'll
much.
do too is they'll provide a longitudinal document too. And so, we're only in our second year, so this is we're barely begun, but I think that's the value over time of it is just more data is more, and we are relatively small. We're going to see some fluctuations and things. That's just going to be a result of how small we are.
Right.
5 people answering differently or 3 people answering
It's a big
differently is a couple percentage points up or down. So looking at that long range data, and I guess I'm just excited that we have data. If you asked us 5 years ago these questions, how do people feel? We didn't know the answer, or 10 years ago, and I think it's pretty neat that we have data to be able to say, all right, what are the areas that we can celebrate, and there's quite a few, but then also to say, well, okay, yeah, what are the areas we need to tackle? And it's not just we're doing this because the principal wants to do this or the superintendent wants to do this. It's really powerful to share with staff to say, hey, this is what you were all saying as staff members about discipline, or this is what the students are saying about how they feel with engagement and so on. And it's a pretty powerful thing to let the data speak for itself, and how we, not shy away from it and just say, all right, well, what's the strategy to change it if it's something we want to grow. And neat to see, those areas that we did see some pretty good growth in the areas where we were struggling. So from last year to this year. So that then to share that with the staff to show like, hey, what you're doing is making a difference. So any specific ones for Rob that or if you get a chance to look at it more too, shoot an email to say, hey, this page or this question here, what does this really mean? I know I love listening to him, and then afterwards when I go back and look at myself, it can be overwhelming. There's a lot of data there because we get spreadsheets too that have all that breakdown. I mean, we could spend hours and days going through that.
I'm curious how we relate to other schools that either have or don't have the Warrior Wednesday type stuff going on, that curriculum.
I don't know how you
To know if that would be effective, if that's affecting any of this or not,
Yeah. Well, I think, what programs.
It seems to be, if you're looking at it, just.
Well, in zones of regulation at the elementary school, a lot of things. And there's no way really to probably know what programs all the districts are doing, but it's good to know, like, the comparables are districts similar to us. Just, to see how do we stack up. Because there's sometimes, we look at some of those numbers and I think, oh, that's not good, or that's good, and then you realize, like, oh, that is good. I didn't initially think it was, or oh, that's not as good as I thought it was.
I wonder if statistically they keep track of anything like that or not.
Yeah, they'd have to ask, what programs we're using and stuff. But any other insight? Or again, if you have specific questions, email them to me. I'll email them to Rob. But I think more our questions and discussions more along just like all this info now. What do you do with it? So I think. Well, great segue into the strategic plan scorecard if you want to go to that.
We're moving on to the strategic plan scorecard review, portions pillar 1, 2, and 3.
So it is a good segue because, so I've got that calendar document attached there. And so this time of year in June, what we're set to look at is the engagement surveys, staff survey review, which we just did in school, CTE participation rates, things like that. So it's a good segue into that. So some of the stuff, I think, as we look through our scorecards, is you're going to have seen it already. You're going to see some of that data. But so this is just, these goals we set last spring and last summer. And so it's kind of a long haul to get to now. And I guess I'll preface it too by saying, this summer now is when we start doing the work of rolling over our scorecard for next year, and then we think about, okay, what worked well, what didn't, in terms of strategies or the goals, how we wrote our goals. We've already identified some, and we're like, I'll write that differently next year, or I wish I had done this differently. That all plays into this as well. But then to be able to take, now that we didn't have school perception data when we wrote the goals last year, actually, and now that we have that, we can maybe we write some different goals or focus on some different things. So anyway, I'll start with the high school, Mr. Melberg, and he can kind of give an overview of his.
Absolutely. They have the attachment with the scorecard, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
So we are going pillar 1. You got to scroll down a little bit. We're under support well-being, recognize strengths, and encourage or create engagement. So a couple of goals in there. The first one was we will increase the number of high school students actively involved in a club or sport by 6%. So our 2025 goal was 73%. Happy to report that 84% of our high school kids were actively involved in either a club or a sport. Many of those kids actively involved in multiple, but 84% of our kids are involved. Also today, I created a list. I know I've identified the kids that were not actively involved, and staff will get that list in August, and so that we can look for ways that we can connect those kids that aren't connected here to different clubs or sports that we have. The second one is we will increase the number of students who agree with the statement, if I need help, I have at least one adult at school that I can talk to by 6%. In 2024, school perceptions came back with 79.5% of our students agreed with that statement, and this year 92%. So that increase was, we're pretty excited about that increase, and there's some strategies that went into that to increase that number, and now our goal is likely to be to sort of maintain or increase it slightly from there. If you have questions along the way, please don't hesitate to stop me. Next one is encourage future goals. 95% of in-person students will complete 100% of their grade assigned Zello lessons each year. We did not get to this goal. We have 75% of our kids were able to get there. I will say that our CTE group did a really nice job this fall and early winter of putting systems in place to get us there. The problem is that by the time we got the systems in place, we were behind the 8 ball a little bit. And so I'm pretty confident with those same systems and some tweaks going into the next fall. The fact that we can hit the ground running because the systems are already in place, I'm pretty confident that we're going to get there. So we started a little slow on that one, but that 75% is still a significant increase over where we were at with Zello a year ago.
Do you see pushback in the Zello lessons the way you saw pushback in Warrior Wednesday?
So we're trying to avoid that, and so some of the strategies that we put in place. Initially, we had talked about rolling it out and just doing it in wrap. The issue with that is you don't get consistency across the board in how it's rolled out. So the CT department came up with a plan with specific teachers and classes that they could do it in, and that seemed to work really well. Where we have a hole is like our 7th graders have an exploratory that they can do it in. Our 8th graders have an exploratory. Our freshmen have a health class that it fits quite well with. Our 10th graders have the class with Mrs. Hunter that it fits in perfect with. When we get to our juniors and seniors, that's where we get spread out, and there's a little bit more of an issue of connecting them in a specific class where we're hitting all of them. All in-person students fill out an academic goal sheet. We covered that in the fall, and we use those throughout the 3 parent-teacher conferences as well. And all in-person students will be provided with opportunities for college visits and/or workplace shadowings each year. Again, the CTE group did a fantastic job. They created a tracking document for this. Happy to report that 100% of our kids had this opportunity. In fact, 86% of our students had 2 or more of these opportunities throughout the year. And when you go across the board, 7 through 12, we averaged almost 4.5 opportunities per kid. They came to me with about 2 weeks left in school. They said, we've got 4 kids that haven't had one of these opportunities, and they had a plan for it. And we brought in a student who just finished college and a student who just finished their first year of college, and then met with a Q&A with these kids to just kind of give them a little taste. And they're all junior high kids, so it's just kind of an introduction to kind of what college potentially looks like. But our goal is that we'll keep an eye on those 4 early next year to make sure they're getting some of the career stuff too.
Mr. Melberg, was that a lot of new activities?
You know, it's funny you say that. So that was one of our thoughts is we do so much of this already, but we've never done a great job of tracking it. So most of the things on this list are things that we've done for a number of years. Although I would say there's probably a few additions just because we're more aware of these, more aware of this goal. So we thought about more of these when these opportunities came along. We took advantage of them. But I would say probably 95% of what's on this tracking form is things that we've been doing for years. So kudos to that group. Moving on, we're on to the staff, pillar number 2, our staff. On the school perception survey, the results surrounding the question, how likely are you to recommend the district as a place of employment? We want it to be above our comparison score. And so in this building, Nettie, this answers your question. That number there is specifically to this building is an 8.13 out of 10. So that met the goal. The next one, again, school perceptions, the results surrounding the statement. I feel supported and recognized by my colleagues when I do a good job. We were 3.76 out of 5, so we overwhelmingly, agree with that statement. But we didn't achieve our goal of increasing it by 6% to get into 4.2. That's one where Chris mentioned earlier, as we look at how we track these goals. That one I think just needs to be written differently, because 3.76 is a good number to be at, but short of that 6%. The next one is I regularly support and recognize my colleagues. Same thing there. We've got a nice number of 3.96 out of 5, but we're short of that 4.2. That one we can't do a comparison score because that's our own question. That's not a school perceptions question. That's the one that they created for us. And so we can't get a comparison number on that. So we'll have to figure out kind of how we want to write that goal or where we want to be with it in the future. School perception survey, the results surrounding the statement, I have opportunities for training and professional development to improve my work, will be above our comparison score. So 4.08 out of 5 gives us the green light there. We hit that goal. And on the school perception survey, the results surrounding the statement, in the last year, I received useful feedback to help improve my work. That was also above our comparison score at 4.09 out of 5. Moving to pillar number 3, there's 2 on pillar 3 that fall into this June category, and that is we will increase our rate of participation by 6% in school to work and dual credit programs amongst our juniors and seniors. Happy to report that we hit that goal in 23-24. 20% of our juniors and seniors are taking advantage of this, and this year we were at 34% for our juniors and seniors that were either in a dual credit or a school to work program. And the last one is all teachers will participate in annual community business visit. And a couple of months ago, we visited the Amory Hospital and Advanced Food. We had a great night. We got a ton out of it as a staff, and I think that is going to be on a future board meeting coming up to kind of talk through what that evening looked like. But overwhelmingly positive feedback from the staff on that night. So we met that goal.
Okay. Turn it over to Mrs. Anderson at the elementary.
So again, sharing out on the same goals. So scrolling down in the elementary scorecard, pillar 1 towards the bottom, support well-being, recognize strengths, create engagement. Number of students who can identify at least one trusted adult will increase by 2%. So our school counselor, Jamie Van Hooklam, asks this question. Our school perception survey, we start 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. So she's asking the question to every student K6, just so she has that data. Last spring, it was 94% of the student body. We were hoping to raise that. We're at 95% of the student body, pretty high percentage, but still wanting to make sure. And she has, since she does it one-to-one individually, she knows which kiddos don't necessarily have somebody identified, so we have a list that we will see how we can improve on that.
I'll speak, sorry, jump in, but that's probably one of those where we wrote a goal that was, we were already at 94 and we said we were going to increase by 2%, probably wasn't a realistic level of growth. That's pretty hard to do. So,
the second part of that is 100% of students will receive a positive postcard twice per year. We did that. So that's just Mona prints out and 270 postcards all labeled and ready to go. Teachers and staff grab them throughout the fall semester and write them out, and we mail them out, and then we print them again in January and do it again. So we may adjust that to 1 time per year, just because it was, you're thinking over 500 different postcards getting sent out and same amount of people doing that. But great feedback from parents and kiddos who receive those. It's fun to get mail, and then anyone can write to anybody. So we try to encourage classroom teachers to choose kids they maybe had before, kids they're getting to know, so it doesn't, well, of course my teacher's going to write me something. So we do try to make sure that is spread out a little bit. And then encourage future goals. 95% of 6th grade students will complete the Zello career inventory. This is also Mrs. Van Hooklam. She does this in the guidance classes, and 100% of the 6th graders completed their Zello. And then we are looking at pillar 2, the different categories there. Same questions that we look at in the high school scorecard. Like how likely are you to recommend the district as a place of employment, wanting to be at or above the statewide mean or median, and We were at, last spring, 7.44 out of 10, and now 7.69 out of 10. Recognizing and support, I feel supported, recognized by my colleagues. Our goal was to be at or above 4 out of 5. Mr. Melberg has written his as like a growth score. Ours is written, I mean, we can certainly talk about how to maybe make that more similar. But we were at 4.06, we're at 4.08 out of 5. And the question that Clear Lake adds, I regularly support and recognize, goes both ways. We want them to feel supported, but what are they doing to support others? And again, wanting to be at or above 4 out of 5. Last spring, 4.19. This spring, 4.22. So some growth there. And then finally, the develop. I have opportunities for training and PD to improve my work. We wanted to be at or above the mean or median on the statewide results, which were 3.77. We're at 4.0. And in the last year, received useful feedback, wanted to be again at that state result, 3.66. Bingo, 3.66. So, and then the final category there, we did not survey parents. We're going to be doing that every other year. So there is not data to see that growth until spring of 26.
I think that's everything for elementary too. For the special ed one, Mrs. Powers isn't here tonight, and I said I would do that one. So again, some of this will be repetitive. You're going to see similar information, but if you get to the, if you get the special ed scorecard open, first pillar, scroll down again, support well-being, recognize strengths. So it's some of the same data, and it's what it ends up being is, so we saw high school data, elementary data, and the special ed department is looking at the whole district-wide data, so you're going to see it's going to match what I have in mind when I get to mine in a second here. But so really not much to, it's difficult to separate out special ed students for those questions. There's not really a great way to do that on, you can't do that off the survey. So and then number of students involved in activities and sports or clubs, I should say. Students feeling connections there. You've seen that data already. Encouraging future goals. So this is one that Mrs. Powers led, especially for special education students with IEPs. 90% of students with disabilities in grades 10 through 12 will participate in 2 or more of the strategies listed, and that is the strategy sheet from their transitioning. So 100% of kids had at least one strategy, and actually 94% of kids did 2 or more strategies. And over a third of kids did 3 or more strategies. So the goal was to have kids complete at least one strategy on the transition skill document, but 94% of them actually did more than one. So some nice information there. If we go to Pillar 2 about staff, again, her data, I say Mrs. Powers' data from the special ed department, again, it's looking at both buildings, and this is looking at all staff. We did not single out or separate out the small number of special education teachers or whatever. So, but we did separate the teachers from the paras from each other, so you can see that. Now that's all paraprofessionals. That doesn't mean just special education paraprofessionals. It's all. However, there are more sped paras than there are any other category of paras. So, but green light scores on those. How likely are you to recommend the district as a place of employment? Again, with the teachers beating the comparison score of 6.9 quite handily with 7.79. And then the paras, how likely are you to recommend the district as a place of employment? Again, beating the comparison score with a 7.18 out of 10, and quite a bit of growth from last year, jumping up a full point, which is a lot. Recognition and support, again, separated out teachers and paras. And I feel supported and recognized by my colleagues when I do a good job, 4.0 out of 5 or higher. And for the teaching staff, 4.03. For the para, Paras, the goal is to be at a 3.6 out of 5 or higher, and they're at 3.45. So again, a little bit of didn't meet the goal there, and a little bit of a slip there from last spring. So, but it's recognition from colleagues. So again, takes more questions to dive into that, for the whys behind that, and then I regularly support and recognize my colleagues, and I regularly recognize my colleagues for teachers and paras. Sorry, both met the goal there, and both showed growth from last year at this time. So a 4.15 and a 4.27, both beating the goal of 4.0 and 4.0. So. Opportunities for training and professional development. And so the teacher staff was, 0.05 decrease, but still outpaced the goal of 4.0. The paraprofessionals actually saw an increase. And if I recall, I shouldn't just recall. I was trying to think about how the paras compared to other districts. I know that our paras think highly of their opportunities for PD, which was nice to see. And then getting useful feedback. We saw an increase there with the paras particularly, and we did have a new process this year for evaluation, and a new tool to do that for our support for our paraprofessionals. And also this year, you recall, we instituted the stay interviews for all staff. So some highlights there. And then when we get to the third pillar, family and community, this was again where Mrs. Powers had done a specific survey for students and families with IEPs. How would you rate communications from the special education staff? Will be rated at 3 or out of 4 or higher. So 3 or higher out of 4. And we saw the mid-year. We heard about that data then, and then so we had 78% of sorry, this is not my data, so I gotta slow down here a little bit. So yeah, the first quarter, second quarter, yeah. So by the second quarter, we did meet our green goal of having 89% rated 3 or above. And then the second question there: how would you rate your comfort level participating and sharing during IEP meetings? To be rated at 3 or higher out of 4. And saw a little bit of a dip from first quarter to second quarter. We had 19 responses there. That's out of 60 some families, so we don't get a high response. We do a follow-up survey. We don't ask them on the spot or anything like that. Of course, it's meant to be anonymous after the fact, so we don't get a high degree of return there. So it's but it's something we're going to continue to track, and we want to continue asking the question. So, that's a lot there. We're getting into the weeds quite a bit on this. Anything else to go back to there? Any questions? I can look, and with the district scorecard too, and I can try to go through this fairly briefly, just because some of it is again what you've heard before. So as far as the student part, most days I like my school, and that was an area that we saw as an area of concern. So our goal was to increase. So we did increase it, but we still have work to do there. So that's an area that we want to continue to grow. So we met our goal of growth, but we want to continue to look at that. If I need help, I have at least one adult at school I can talk to. Again, we've seen that. Now this is district-wide, looking at both buildings combined together, and it's 91%, which is great. Again, you've seen this data already. Student percentage of kids who participate in a club or activity is at 84%, which is outstanding. The next part, encouraging future goals, is right below. I don't have it stop-lit because this is the first year we really tracked this kind of data. So I just have the information there for 7th through 12th. Again, we saw from Mr. Melberg, and then we heard already from from the 6th graders that 100% completed their Zello. And we'll look at a way to combine that data better for the District 1 next year. But that's our baseline to start from going forward. We really didn't have that data last year. If we go down to our staff pillar, number 2, again, recommendation of place to work, and there's no percentage there, so it just has to be the scale score out of 10. So again, 7.88 was remaining above the median. That was our goal, and we showed growth from last year as well. Oh, and I should back up too. We will again report back in September. We'll do the retention rate. If you remember that, we did that last year. We like to do it at the end of the summer because we still have changes over the summer. So. The recognize and support, again, I'm trying to tease out any things that are different from what you've heard already. If they're feeling recognized and supported when they do a good job in general, that's a higher score there. And then I feel comfortable sharing input and concerns with my supervisor. So again, that was an area we noted some concern because it was put us on the lower percentile compared to other districts, but also for some perspective, we still have 76% saying yes, I feel comfortable doing that. I also noted that there was differences between the different employment groups too. So while it's an area to focus on, we still have 3/4 of people saying that they do feel comfortable sharing. And again, staff are feeling good about their opportunities for professional development and getting feedback. And I think we saw decent growth there in the feedback part because, again, of the stay interviews, and I think the new tool for support staff evals or for paraprofessional evals. And then again, I'll wrap it up with the families and community. Again, we didn't do a parent survey here this spring. We'll do that in the future. And then increasing our rate of participation in School of Work. Again, that's data that you saw from Mr. Milberg. So we did meet our goal there of increasing by 6% from last year. Beat that by quite a bit. So lots of stuff, lots of information, I realize. And as we'll continue to update these and put these on our website like we do after the meeting. Overall questions, takeaways. I know that's a lot. I'll just share that so much of the value in this too is just like the conversations we have while we're doing it, while we're breaking down the data. As I said, we're already having conversations about, oh man, that goal, we'll write that differently next year. That wasn't written in a good way. And looking at some of the, do we want to continue measuring some of these things if we're already blowing it out of the water? Or is it a good affirmation to keep measuring it, to show people what are some areas maybe we want to set goals instead, or what strategies do we want to try differently? So we're having those conversations as we go through this, which is the great thing. And again, to be able to share with staff to drive that impetus to, for the staff to come up with strategies to say, well, we could do this. Like a CT crew, for example, this year, they're the ones that drove so much of that, change.
So we're obviously using this to steer our ship, and so what are the big things that stood out that maybe are changing our course a little bit, or what are we doing different for you guys?
Well, I think some of what you heard here, like the career and tech ed department, the way that to me is one of the big ones here, just the way that they created a tool to track, how do we know if kids are getting exposed to these opportunities? They created this tool to track it. They found out, number one, we're already doing quite a few things, but then they also found out, I think, some of the holes in the areas to say, well, how can we close that hole there? So to me, that was one of the big ones, and I guess a lot of what we've talked about already.
A year ago, I wouldn't have known the 28 kids that were not in a club or a sport.
Sure.
I would have had a guess.
Sure.
Now I know, and now we can put some things in place to see if we can. We're not going to get them all, but there might be some there that, hey, why isn't this kid connected? We've got some opportunities here, here, and here. Let's see if we can reach out and convince that kid that this would be a good idea for him. And that's just one example
Yeah.
But many with just having this information is, that we didn't have before.
Any other big ones that stood out for you guys?
You guys must not have had this too long. I mean, if they just took the survey in April.
Yeah, we got it. Mid-May, early May, mid-May, and then honestly,
Crunch time.
we
Right.
didn't get to,
Yeah,
it's
it's
just
a hard
time of
time.
year
Yeah.
where, I didn't even, I told them that they're like, don't even share it with me right now because
Yeah.
I won't even be able to look at it, so.
That when he was asking.
It was
why
more-
should we bring it up,
Yeah,
that's
just
for district
craziness
wide.
at the end of the year, so. Rob had,
Corey, the one you were asking about.
Rob had zoomed in with me, Rob Demise had, to kind of give me the overview right away. And then I was like, same thing, like, we need time to process this a little bit, so. And we need, I think, again, this summer we'll do it more when we set our goals for next year, we'll process it even more. By building, by department.
That same week we had 3 tough conversations.
So I'm just asking Brian here, I know we had some tough staff conversations. And those conversations were happening when this perception thing was going out. So remember, I mean, there were some pretty rough things that you guys were dealing with this spring. The same time some of these teachers were taking this perception.
Mhm.
So just that jumped into my mind that, if it's them and a friend was
Mhm.
taking it after you've had some tough conversations, that could have really
Yeah.
skewed some staff.
And he showed me his
Perspective.
numbers there, and it kind of correlated to the pillars there a little bit, so
Yep.
it's good
Yeah.
to see that stuff's aligning, so. Thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know it's a lot of information, but
Yeah.
appreciate you guys.
And we're gonna have more as we move to the review of the
Yeah.
achievement gap reduction. So let's
Yeah.
Keep this moving.
Keep it moving, huh? Okay, so AGR, end of year summary. So Mrs. Anderson.
So the DPI, Department of Public Instruction, it's required to present at board meetings a couple times a year and share the data, and then submit the information to the DPI. We were up for renewal, as it says in the notes here, so Mrs. Jillick and I worked on renewing for another 5 years. I just got just shot me an email back, like, we got your stuff, so I guess that
Yep.
means we are.
Yep.
So if we just look at this, and I'm not gonna get into a lot, honestly, is it our July meeting when do we talk about all the data?
Fall, September.
The fall,
September.
Once we get everything back. So we're gonna see this again in the fall. So I'll talk it through, but I do want you to remember, we started the year using FastBridge, K-6, reading and math. Mid-year, due to Act 20, we switched K through 3rd grade to a whole different assessment tool for reading. So we're even looking at this and understanding that we started the year with something completely different than we mid-year and end of year for half of our students. So it's hard to even see it go across. But one thing that we did notice, and if you recall from past years, our kindergarten teachers always felt very deflated by the end of the year because they just felt like their scores for proficiency were declining. We're in a different, using a different tool now. It's called Ames Web Plus. We look at the 25th percentile. That's the mandate from Act 20. So any students 24th and below would not be considered proficient. EL just means early literacy. So the winter score, it says fall semester progress. So that's the winter test, the progress up until winter. And you can kind of see they were more pleased, to end the year with 83% of their kindergartners being at or above that 25th percentile is fantastic. So I don't need to necessarily read through the percentages. You can scroll and kind of see. Because it is, achievement gap reduction is for kindergarten through 3rd grade. That is, there's 3 different strategies. It's 18 or 1 class sizes. It's one-to-one tutoring, it's instructional coaches, there's different strategies to use. The one we use most often is that class size reduction. Our class sizes are less than 18 or less. I did put in, just for your information, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, they did use FastBridge the whole year in both reading and math. So that data makes, like, you can totally follow it from beginning of year to end of year. We meet numerous times. Well, every time we are in a collaborative PLC process, teachers are digging through their data. We are working more towards being a data-driven school. We just want to make sure, especially with some of our new staff, that we fully understand what it means, what the data means, and how to make those choices based on what we're seeing. This is one test that happens 3 times a year. We do have a variety of formative and summative assessments that also give us the information that we need to make those educational decisions for all students to learn at high levels. So, any questions specifically? I'll just highlight one more thing, just because we're so used to letters, alphabet soup here. If you see on 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, in parentheses, ORF, oral reading fluency. The Ames Web Plus tests a variety of different things, but what we are mandated to show that percentile is a 1-minute read with the teacher, oral reading fluency, how many words per minute they are reading.
Yeah, we were all schools were put in a tough spot because Act 20 got passed late June last year, I think, mid to late June, I should say. And, so we make those decisions about what assessments we're using in the spring. And so, we've been using FastBridge for a number of years, and then now mid-year we had to switch streams. So kudos to the elementary staff for learning the new assessment, and it'll be more consistent next year too. And for Teresa and Andrea for leading that change.
Okay. Next, we have discussion and approval of the district annual meeting date.
Yeah, so we usually, traditionally, we've done that last Monday in August. That would be the 25th this year. And if we, that's the first day of in-service. It worked out last year. It was the same thing. I don't know if I guess I personally kind of have built our schedule around that for this summer and working with our partners to do that. So I'd be in favor of keeping it at that same spot.
Goodyear?
Yep. Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the district annual meeting date of Monday, August 25th, 2025.
Second. All right, properly moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, seeing none, motion passes on to...
Can I just say, we've done it at 7 o'clock last few years. Is that
Yep.
good? You with
Yeah,
that?
that
Okay.
works.
All right.
Yep.
All right, on to superintendent notes.
Okay. So just recapping back to May, just activities, end of the year stuff. Great Pops concert from band and choir, graduation. We all participated in our last Lakeland conference meeting. As a superintendent, as a principal, so on. We're switching conferences next year, so had a nice little conversation there and a little bit of history. Moving to a new conference after being in Lakeland pretty much since its inception, I believe. We had student activities. We had elementary, had the EMS crew visit them in mid-May, junior kindergarten prom. 6th graders came and visited the high school after the seniors graduated, did their spring visit to get acclimated to the building for the first time. They'll come back later in the summer. Graduation for kindergarten and 6th grade, so those celebrations. We had a really nice retirement and year-end celebration last Thursday for our retiring staff. We had 7 staff members, 170 total years of cumulative experience in the district retiring. So we did a thing new this year where we invited past retirees. We tried to reach out as many ways we could, whether it was mail, texting, whatever, to retirees that we knew, and we had probably about 15 that came. And that was really well received, and we hope to make that a tradition where we invite past retirees to come and kind of make it a school reunion. And a lot of really nice feedback from them. They really appreciated that, and we really appreciated seeing those former colleagues too. So lots of excitement been going on with playoffs, with softball and baseball. Each won a playoff game this year. Golf had a lot of success. Conference champs, regional champs, I believe. And a lot of success there. Kids with individual accolades. Track had some great success as well. Placed well with the conference tournament, or conference meet, I should say. But the girls actually won the regionals for the first time since 2007. Sent a bunch of kids, boys and girls sent a bunch to sectionals. 8 athletes made it to state in 5 events. We did have 3 students make the podium at state, so the most we've had in a while. Shelby Meyer got 2nd place in the discus. Evan Kane got 3rd place in the pole vault, and Alexis Berg got 6th place in the 300 hurdles. And a couple of those set school records in the process. So got summer activities firing up. We heard Mr. Rosine talking about some, just sports off-season kind of activities. ETS is going. Swimming lessons are going on this week and next for elementary kids through Community Ed if they're wanting to do that. Summer school in-service day is tomorrow already, and then students are back for summer school Wednesday. Mr. Crawford's here with us tonight, but he is taking a group of students, along with some other staff and parents that are going with, down to Des Moines, Iowa to go see the Hamilton musical. So exciting. Happen to be going with myself personally, so looking forward to that. Next week we have the PLC conference in Minneapolis happening. We've got 6 teachers attending that. 3 of them are new and 3 of them are repeats. We were able to basically send everybody who was able to go. But yeah, busy wrapping up the year that just finished, getting ready for summer school, finalizing the budget year in the business office and in the offices, starting up kind of the summer process of looking at summer projects and things to do. So it's been an intense month, and so we're shifting gears here a little bit now. So appreciate everybody's efforts on our entire staff.
All right, and that will move us into closed session. So we'll move into closed session pursuant with Wisconsin Statutes 19.851E. The board will review competitive bids and vendor contracts. I'm going to poll the board. Maddie? Yes. Corey?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Okay, myself?
Okay.
Okay.
Well, yeah, Eve's hands are full. Thanks, Eve. And we're recording.
All right, we're up to consideration and approval of the updated contract for web hosting and a communication platform. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve the contract for website hosting and communication platform with Aptigee.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, properly moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to future agenda items. Looks like we have the board calendar on there.
Yeah, I've got the board calendar on there for people to have as a reference to see what's coming. Yeah.
We gonna revisit the dual sport, because wasn't that just a trial for spring?
Yeah, I feel like
sometime?
that
Mr. Rosine put out a survey to the coaches recently, and he hasn't even gotten that compiled yet, I don't think. But yep, definitely.
Did the
I've had-
students get surveyed?
A dozen
Or
parents or
just
so.
the coaches?
I can't remember.
The dual sport students.
Yeah. Or just all spring athletes
I've had some
on how that worked?
parents of various likings and dislikings, so.
I didn't
how
say
many
parent
markets?
survey, I said
Just,
students.
yeah, so,
And let's just get that survey and then we can talk about it.
yeah.
That's what doesn't?
That's,
We're all in open.
Yep.
All right,
Don't hold me to that, Matt, but for some reason, Dale shared the list with me early this spring, and
okay.
I want to say it's around a dozen.
Yep. I just want to get that in the agenda first.
Mm-hmm.
so we'll leave
Start
it at
Well,
that.
next year we're in a different conference, and I think it's gonna be a whole different story too. So.
All right.
Okay.
No other. So then, we're moving to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All right, properly moved and seconded. We are adjourned.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.